Good evening and welcome to another episode of Mr. Piggy Talks. Well, this evening we're going to have a slight change to our programme because we're going to be discussing now railways, and in particular a very famous class of locomotive which BR British Railways had introduced in the very early 1960s and operated right through until the early 1980s. And you probably guessed it already which one it is. It is in fact the Class 55, otherwise known as the Deltic. So if I may start this discussion, of course don't forget what we're trying to do in these videos is to link some history, some discussion material with a modelling subject. And the modelling subject I have here is with me now. This is a model of the famous Deltic in the BR blue and yellow front end. This is the Class 55 Deltic locomotive. It's called the Fife and Forfar Yeomanry. This is a model produced by Lima, again in the sort of very late 1970s into the 1980s, and it's the middle of 90s. I'm not sure quite when they stopped making this. There were two editions of this. There's this classic, of course, BR blue and yellow. I also have an earlier BR green example, but this is probably more sort of interest to viewers, I imagine. This is why I produce it today. Of course, what is so fascinating about the Deltic is it just looks good. It really looks good. It looks powerful. It looks effective. It doesn't look particularly fast, but actually it is very fast. I'll come to that in a moment. And it has this very classic, if you like, bull nose front of it, and this characteristic of a number of classes of BR locomotives. The very famous Class 37, the Peaks, of course, the Class 40, the Class 45, and a few others that are related to them. So it's that very characteristic sort of slightly elongated nose and the cab windows behind it. It has its origins from an American design of diesel electric locomotive that these things sort of owe their sort of heritage from. But that's what that's why we sort of look at them and think, wow, they look good, they look powerful. And so this is a Lima locomotive in of course 00 scale. It's of course a Coco locomotive. That means there are three lots of axle wheels on each bogie, as opposed to a Bobo where there were two lots of axle wheels on each bogie. And it's an immensely good looking and powerful locomotive. Let me just tell you a little bit about it and its origin and history, because the Deltic was designed by a great sort of titan of British engineering in the 1950s, 60s called General Electric, and they worked this into locomotives. For those of you who are sort of aircraft buffs, lots of planes here you already see. They're famous, of course, for producing two very famous British jets in the 1950s and 60s. Of course, the Canberra had its origin with them, and also the English Electric Lightning. So they've got quite a pedigree when it comes to producing sort of top-end, if I may say, boys' own sort of exciting bits of kit, which, for my generation, they really were the bee's knees. So not only are they into locomotives, they're into planes too. Also, there's an aviation link with the actual engine, the diesel electric engine which powered these locomotives. The diesel electric motors were of course produced in this case by Napier. Now Napier have of course an aviation pedigree of their own. They produced the Napier Sabre aviation engine in World War II, powered two very famous aircraft, the Typhoon and of course the later Tempest. That was an immensely it was basically two aircraft engines welded together, made the planes terribly powerful and strong, and was an immense success. So those of you who know about the Typhoon, tank busting planes in Normandy, and then later the Tempest, who were basically our best piston engine fighter of the war. So Napier have an aviation pedigree. They produced this engine, the engine for the Deltic, which at its time was the most powerful diesel-electric single-unit locomotive in the world. It was absolutely a monster. It was very powerful. So if I could refer to a book here, reference book, again, keeping to those of us who are of this generation, we'll remember the Ladybird books. And this is a fabulous one. How it works, the locomotive, and its diesel and electric locomotives. And I was looking at this only a few years ago, I say. It was one I had when I was a child, and it gives a most fantastic explanation as to, you know, what modern locomotives, the engines, how they worked. And the diesel electric power plant, it's diesel, of course, that's self-explanatory. Electric, it had an electric transmission, so the power from the engine is transmitted to the wheels of the locomotive by an electric transmission system, not hydraulic. Diesel hydraulic locomotive, we'll discuss those in another episode, an exciting episode I should say. But where does the name Deltic come from? Well, the answer to that is in the arrangements of the cylinders. So there were 3 cylinders that were arranged basically in a triangle. I'll show you here. So you can see there are 3 cylinders with these pistons operating against each other at either end of the cylinders, and they're arranged in a sort of, well, a D shape. So D for Deltic, delta wings, they were sort of basically V or arrow-shaped, D-shaped things, and that's where it comes from. So it says here, one rather special design is the Deltic engine. In this engine, the cylinders are placed in triangular formation, each cylinder having 2 pistons working in opposite directions. So this piston here is going that way, and this piston here is going that way. And that's where this locomotive's immense power is derived from. And then later on in this book, it gives you a fabulous picture, lovely artwork in these Ladybird books of a Deltic locomotive there, and comparing it to it's sort of a stablemate of the same era, which is a diesel hydraulic locomotive, the Western class, which is just above that. And it does actually mention the tremendous horsepower difference. So the Western class sort of weighed in at a fabulous 2,700 horsepower. But my goodness, the Deltic diesel electric locomotive with electric transmission weighed in much better than that with 3,300 horsepower. So it really was a beast. Well, it was a beast for a reason, because it had probably the most difficult job of all, which was to pull the express trains that ran the greatest length across Britain. So from London King's Cross all the way up to Edinburgh Waverley, wonderful station in Edinburgh if any of you have been to see it. And so that express train was a very long route, was hauled by the Deltics, and they could get these things up to 100 miles an hour, which was quite something in a day. Actually, they could go much faster than that, and often did. Speeds, you know, getting into 116, 117 miles per hour were not unknown, so they could really get these things going. They made a tremendous amount of noise. They also, really very popular these days, but they used to belch out an enormous amount of thick sort of smoke, because they used to burn, there's a fair bit of oil that was burnt off when they were sort of getting going and getting the pistons moving, etc. So quite a bit of smoke would come out of these, which these days I think would probably be regarded as not very environmentally friendly. So the Deltic locomotive was very much used to pull these passenger trains. They really didn't operate on mixed freight or goods trains at all. They pulled, you know, substantial rakes of carriages up and down that East Coast main line at speed, and they were only around for about 20 years. There weren't many of them built. Only 22 of them were built, and they didn't last very long. They were, by about 1981-82, basically all withdrawn rather suddenly, because they were superseded by a locomotive which we all know, the Intercity 125 high-speed train, HST. Basically, they were introduced on the Western region routes, and then in the late 70s, and then subsequently used across the network, and they displaced, if you like, the Deltics off the scene, and these high-speed express trains were now operated by 125s, and the Deltics were withdrawn. What happened to them then? Well, it's rather sad because they were very high maintenance vehicles. They were costly to maintain and keep going. It wasn't really viable to keep them, to put them onto any alternative routes. So very sadly, they were all withdrawn in quick order, and 6 were kept for preservation. There are still some used now on preserved routes. I can't tell you which ones they are now, but I haven't got that knowledge in my head. But you can still see them, and they're most impressive beasts when you can. So I'll quickly also turn now, because we're very shortly going to go and have a look at this model in operation and see the Lima locomotive doing its stuff. I've got a wonderful set here, if I can just show this to camera. This is a Lima Models box set. Isn't that lovely? So it has here the locomotive, plus 3 carriages. You'll get to see them on a layout shortly. You've got a Mark 1 Lima buffet car. It's a very nice model. And then you've got the Lima Mark 2 first class and second class brake carriages as well, which combine that set there, and it's called the Intercity. It's a beautiful box set, quite rare, difficult to get. I got this on eBay about a year ago, and I'm obviously delighted with it. So that's for now, folks. We'll go now to the layout and have a quick look at that, see it in operation, so you can see it doing its stuff. Actually, the Lima loco is as powerful and as impressive on the layout as a real thing that it portrays. So I'll let you be the judge of that as well later. But let's go and have a look at this now. An exciting departure. We're going to go look at this running properly on the layout. Thank you. And welcome now to a live running of the diesel electric Deltic Class 55 locomotive. Live running now on the layout. She's pulling a rake of 4 coaches, 2 standard BR Mark IIs, a Mark 1 buffet, and a BR Mark II brake coach. So she's doing really well. We'll rank her up a bit, so get a bit faster. Here she comes, racing for the station. We can probably get her stoke her up a bit more if you like. Won't be scale speed, but here we go. Yeah, here she goes. And here we go, another run. Isn't that good? You can hear the power of that locomotive. It's almost like the real thing. Having no difficulty whatsoever in pulling that rake of coaches. And she's actually stonking away. We'll slow her down a bit because she's going a bit too fast. We don't want to fly off the corners. But there we are. There you have it. Enjoy. It's quite a treat. Slow her down. Here she comes. Oh dear. Here she comes. All done. Many thanks. Well, I hope you thoroughly enjoyed that as much as I did. It's very nice to see it on layout, doing its stuff in that beautiful little set that Lima produced. So a very, very impressive locomotive, I think, and it's really is an all-time favourite. I can't think of anyone who's going to say they don't like a Deltic. It's sort of so iconic of British Railways diesel electric expansion in the 50s and 60s, where they replaced the steam trains with diesel hydraulic locomotives, and of course there were electric ones too. We'll discuss those again in another episode. But it really was, a golden era, wasn't it, of modernity. So the steam era has been replaced by modern locomotives, really doing their stuff, and most impressive. And I've actually never been on one of these as a child. I've been on westerns coming out of Paddington going to Plymouth in the past, but I never had the pleasure or the privilege to be on a train pulled by a Deltic. I wish I had, but there we go. We can't turn the clock back. But so I think you will thoroughly enjoy that. Really is a sort of thoroughly enjoy that and agree with me that the Deltic has a special place in our hearts. It's sort of like the golden age. It was this sort of period post-war where Britain was modernising, getting over the war, rebuilding. Aviation was taking off in the 50s and 60s. We were leading the field with jet technology and jet aircraft. Passenger aircraft too. We had some successful designs, and also back at home on the railways, things were looking up. We got some super locos, new rolling stock, new carriages, and it really was a sort of a great period to be on the railways, working on them, and obviously travelling on them too, because that's the whole point of them. They're not just there for the sake of modelers like me and you. They were there to do a real job and serve the public. And boy, didn't the Deltic just do that? It really did. So anyway, we'll end it now for today. Many thanks indeed, and let's see you again soon, folks. Bye bye.